school year. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us tonight. We really, really appreciate it. We'll be hosting monthly webinars in support of educator wellbeing throughout this school year. OHEL's Teacher Support Helpline is a free, confidential space for educators, school counselors, youth support professionals to access support and guidance, whether it be for their own personal well-being or for challenges that they're facing in the classroom. We have a team of experienced mental health professionals that are available to answer your call. This school year, we've updated our hours, and we're now available Monday through Thursday from 12 till 2 p.m., 4 to 6 p.m., and 9 to 10 p.m. Tonight's webinar, we are really, really excited to be partnering with Azrieli Graduate School of Jewish Education and Administration, Hidden Sparks, the Jewish Education Project, and Prisma, and we are funded by UJA Federation of New York. Tonight's presentation is by Glenn Manning, Senior Project Manager at Harvard's Making Caring Common, discussing Making Caring Common in your school, building relationships in a classroom community, where Glenn will teach us evidence-based strategies to begin the school year with strong student connection. Glenn leads Making Caring Commons school-based initiatives where he supports a variety of research efforts, helps school systems gather and use data to guide their programming and practice. He develops and assesses evidence-based strategies to promote ethical capacities in young people, and he consults with districts and schools to create positive changes in their cultures and climate. Throughout this presentation, please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to address them. I'm turning it over to you, Glenn.
Great, thank you so much, Carly. I'm going to share my screen so you can see, follow along here. Thanks again for this incredible introduction and this wonderful opportunity to speak with everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to take your questions at the end, and you know, everything is on the table. So questions big or small, write them down, make sure that we capture those. I'm mostly excited to sort of get to speak with you all. So keep that in mind. I'll try and keep this short but informational. I'll speak a little bit today about, you know, making caring common, how we got started, what we're really focused on, caring and justice, why we focus on it. I'll speak a little bit about our Caring Schools network and talk about listening deeply, which is an evidence-based strategy for promoting deep listening in schools. And then if we have a little bit of time at the end, I thought maybe we could tack on a little bonus round where I can share some of our research, and possibly there might even be a pop quiz, but don't worry, it's not for credit. So nobody loses any points or anything. Again, Making Caring Common, we are a project at Harvard Graduate School of Education convened by Rick Weisborg, who's our faculty director, and we're really here to help educators and families raise kids who care about others and the common good. Our vision is one in which young folks learn to care for others day to day in sort of regular small ways, but at the same time learn to come to seek out and understand justice and do what is right, especially when it may come at a cost to themselves, when it's not always easy to do what's right. We think that young people with these capacities, these skills, will learn to heal the fractures in our society. They'll have the capacities necessary to be community members who build a more caring and just world, and ultimately heal the divides that we see in our society and in our communities today. The way that we do this work is that we partner with schools, practitioners in schools. We partner with families and family organizations and other kinds of nonprofit organizations focused on communities to develop effective strategies for promoting in children key social, emotional, and ethical skills, as well as the commitments to care for others, especially care for those who are different from them, particularly people in need and maybe those who are marginalized. We're here to do this in a way that influences the national conversation in American education about raising and educating caring young people. So we're partnering with folks who can elevate that common message with us, such as this organization here tonight. in terms of why we focus on caring and justice in particular, it's because over the past 40 years or so, we've seen this incredible rise in the extent to which schools, but also families, are focused on things like academic achievement and the promotion of personal happiness or well-being, which is not wrong. There's nothing inherently bad about that, but we tend to demote or devalue in these conversations the importance of caring for others, and especially caring for people who are different from us. And we also kind of crowd out of that conversation when we focus too much on personal success. The extent to which justice and fairness is important for a functioning society and for an education. So when we talk about caring, we're really here thinking about treating people in ways that are meaningful to them and show them that they are valuable to us. And when we talk about justice, we're thinking and talking about mostly treating all people fairly. We think that these are important bedrock capacities in young people. The way that we do this work with schools is the Caring Schools Network. It's this large and growing group of schools that have committed to using data analysis and targeted strategies to promote in schools a positive school culture. We're moving away from ideas about programs and really talking about processes here. We're moving away from just a tight focus on social emotional learning, which is maybe the what, and we're really kind of trying to broaden the conversation to include the why, that moral development piece. So why is it important to care for people who are different than us? What does it mean? What does justice mean in our local community? What does it mean in our more broad global community? And we're moving away from a set curriculum to one where we're really trying to introduce kernels. These are small tools that we can pick up and put down, modify easily, that don't require a lot of training or a lot of materials, but really are opportunities for people to learn and share together. And we walk people through a three-phased approach, which you can see on the screen here. We're really talking about building relationships first, building some key skills in the middle part of the year, and then toward the end of the year, focusing on pursuing justice. I've got here a lot of words on a screen, but the important pieces are that we're, again, that three-phased approach. What it is we're doing, we're using mostly key strategies, okay? When I talk about strategies, I'm going to share one in particular in a second, but these are, again, opportunities for students, faculty, staff, and even families to practice listening deeply to each other, expanding their circle of concern to include people who are different than they are. At other times, maybe thinking about what it means to be somebody committed to justice, and then using a project-based approach to then integrate greater justice into your local community toward the end of the school year. Okay, so again, a three-phased approach, but also an ongoing year-to-year process of continuous improvement. So in terms of those sample strategies, those low lift kind of strategies, these are things like school norms, right? Or classroom norms, which you can find on our website. You can also find our relationship mapping strategy anytime on our website. This is one of our flagship strategies. It's really an opportunity for every faculty and staff member in the school. And when I say every, I talk about schools, including the transportation staff to and from school, often key and vital individuals. I know that, of course, in this context, we're talking mostly about counselors. Counselors should, of course, be included in this conversation, but it's really an opportunity for people across the school, including paraprofessionals and others, to chime in and say, you know, I have a caring and committed sort of relationship with this student, and we line up every student's name, and we provide a column to indicate what kind of relationship we have. And from there, it's about really matching students who are in the most need with caring adults who are going to try to build a relationship with them and providing them the tools and the skills to do that. Okay, this includes mental health tools. It includes tools about finding purpose and next steps. So really kind of a scaffolded approach to integrating a targeted approach for relationships. And then listening deeply is one that I am excited to share with you today. I know that we don't have the option to share through a chat, but what you could do is if you wanted to Google our website, that is to say Making Caring Commons website, and listening deeply, you should be able to find pretty easily this strategy. You can take a look at it anytime. It's free and available to you now. So listening deeply is, it's going to look different in different contexts, going to look different in different schools, and that's okay. So I always kind of say that up front. What we provide and what we really are saying to schools is that the tools we create are research-based. They're tested in schools very often and piloted in schools, and they undergo kind of this process before we release them. But once we do, that doesn't mean that they're the letter of the law. This is an opportunity to take a tool and use it as it is appropriate, okay? So I thought maybe we could take a quick look at listening deeply. A few things that we want to cover are the components. First and foremost, we're going to introduce the strategy. We're going to really talk about the fact that we're going to be thinking and talking for a little bit about listening, why it's important. This is something that many schools do, and in classrooms across the country, right? People are doing this, and in schools around the world, really. I think at the beginning of the school, we might be talking and thinking about what kind of norms are around listening. But that's a little different than understanding the components, and especially components that are focused on listening that's caring, okay? So before we even walk through the strategy, really introducing the fact that there are these several components and identifying them together. First, that we're going to talk about body language and some, sort of how we are going to show that we're listening. And then attentional focus is going to be what happens inside of our brain. Empathy has to do with what it is we follow up with and how we indicate that we were listening all along. So we're going to talk more deeply about these things together. Again, this might look different for different contexts. So it's important to note in different cultural contexts for different students coming from different cultures. Be aware of the ways that they're carrying, the world that they understand with them, and find the kind of language that's necessary to support them in saying, I understand that maybe in one culture, looking down is a sign of respect, right? Especially between somebody who is an elder or somebody who's in a position of respect. But it's actually appropriate to look somebody's in the eyes in this context, right? These kinds of things are often difficult to navigate, but if we have some visuals and we really talk about these different components, what it looks like in our brains, attentional focus, meaning, how does our brain react when we're listening to somebody? Are we just kind of finding our own story, or what it is that we want to say next, or thinking about something else entirely? Or are we really kind of staying on task and making eye contact and doing the pieces in ourselves that kind of indicate that we're listening? And then when we follow up, what kinds of questions are we using? And this is really maybe where Making Caring Common is going to provide some direction, because it's not just that we simply acknowledge feelings or let there be a silence if there needs to be one, but it's really about teaching why that's important and indicating that this is about caring for people, right? It's about showing people that you care, and that when you get this in return, noticing what it's like, right? As opposed to somebody listening to you who maybe isn't really following up with empathic questions, okay? So I'd like to show this as a model. One of our schools, Third Street School, has posted essentially something to this effect. In every room, and every student has just a little 8 by 12 of this with some language on the back according to their developmental level. This is an elementary school. This might look different for a grade 6 through 12 school, or 9 through 12 high school. But essentially, they're using tools like this to match up what it is that they're doing through the listening deeply strategy, our K-5 listening deeply strategy in this case. We modify them for K-2, 3 to 5, and then 6 through 12. And I think online right now we have the 6 through 12 is free and available, but this is a good example of a visual that has arisen out of some of our work. From there, students are getting into doing some group skits inside of listening deeply, so that they're able to model for each other and the class is able to point out together, what it looks like to listen deeply and really do some of this practicing. Again, research shows that practicing in this way can instantiate these skills, can really sort of help foster them really, really meaningfully and galvanize them, really kind of ingrain them, not only learn them quickly, but make sure that they stick around. From there, we indicate in the K-5 version that students might group in together around some, essentially it's a version of Huggy Bear, which I had never really heard of before we created this, not being a K-5 educator myself, but this would be an opportunity for students to really kind of group around one person who's doing some talking, they're doing the listening, and at the end of that cycle, the person who did the speaking can share with the whole class what they saw in terms of deep listening, right? At the same time, students are able to follow up with questions or thoughts and kind of demonstrate that they were listening deeply. So really some core practice here. We're switching roles perhaps in between cycles, and we might even be switching individuals, or rather we're certainly switching individuals, but also maybe switching the roles as well. And then again, doing that sort of whole group sharing. So in almost all of our strategies, we're doing some form of writing, some form of speaking, some form of listening, and often, some form of reading as well, although not too much reading. And again, these are not the kinds of strategies that require lots of professional development. They very rarely require lots of materials or any materials at all. So easy to integrate, easy to try and manipulate. In almost all cases, we indicate that debriefing is important. So at the very end of a strategy, we provide some ideas for how we might talk about the learning we did together, or what kinds of things did this provoke in us, both to try to make sure that we're checking in with people, making sure that, feelings are heard or known in important ways, but also to really do some reflecting on learning. And so, again, you'll see these debrief questions throughout the various strategies. So I'm going to pause here. And I know that we have a Q&A.
Yes, Glenn.
Yeah.
We have a question that came in.
Okay.
So, I'll just read that.
I will say, if we want to keep going after the Q&A, if there aren't any questions beyond this one, there is more that I can share just in terms of our research and some of our research findings. But I'll open it up to questions now, just because I know that was a lot of info. So I want to give people an opportunity to say hello.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, we have a question here. One thing that I have a question about in terms of listening deeply is, how do we not project our own beliefs and biases onto a student?
This is a great question. I think that as long as we're teaching the components of what it means to listen deeply, and in some senses, I was speaking about cultural competency here on the part of the educator. There is an extent to which we're saying, in terms of our context here, maybe in America, we're thinking about what kind of body language. In that body language, there are some norms around that, right? In terms of our attentional focus, what we normally think of as paying attention to someone in our brain, there are some norms around that. And again, following up, what kinds of questions are we asking? What does it mean to show that we cared? Maybe not even just questions. Again, is this a moment that requires silence for a second? Is this a moment that requires a sympathetic look, or even just paraphrasing or asking for clarification in a way that shows you were listening and want to know what it was that they're trying to convey? That is a set of norms, and it may look different in different contexts. So I think it's important for every person who integrates this work to, of course, deeply understand the cultural context, both in which they're teaching, but also from which their students are coming, so that they can meet them, within their zones of proximal development in that regard, and kind of push students further and further toward mastery of this deep listening skill. But no question, both in our document, but I think in any classroom, there are going to be norms that live and breathe around this work. It's good to know what those are. It's good to sort of have a handle of those as somebody integrating the work.
Would you recommend asking a student directly what they're, if you're curious and you're not sure about what the norms are in their culture?
I think that that's certainly, depending on the relationship that you have with that student, an appropriate question. But, again, of course, as is true with all things in education, it's really deeply about the interpersonal relationship between these two individuals. Is there trust for that question to exist? If so, I think it's a very important question, right, for the educator to know the answer to, and perhaps for the student to be able to share. That really kind of might show that the teacher cares, or that the counselor cares, or whoever the adult might be.
Right.
On the other hand, that could be an intrusive question if that trust and that relationship hadn't yet been built.
Right.
You'll notice that, again, it's reflected in the way that we teach students across our school year. We start with building relationships and a connection to the classroom. Then we introduce some skills in the middle, some trying things out once we've established that trust in the relationships, before we kind of push into areas of, shaking things up and really fighting for some justice and tackling injustice together.
Yes, thank you for that.
Sure.
This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted online. So just for those who are asking those questions. Okay, I have another great question here. In a school setting, how does listening deeply align with discipline, behavior management, or consequences?
This is a great question. I think that it can support, of course, it as something like the ounce of prevention that's worth a pound of cure. If we're doing this work well, it will, of course, mitigate some of the problem behaviors that might arise. A lot of our work is focused on the culture and the climate of a school. So we're gathering information from students, staff, and faculty members, family members within schools, using that information to understand the school culture and climate, and then integrating targeted strategies. Listening deeply might be one of those strategies based on the information that we get from the school. We do that over several years, and that work compounds upon itself. We get a better sense of the school and the culture there, and are better able to integrate the right kinds of tools. Again, I just shared one with you today, which is called Listening Deeply. I think that when people are better capacitated to listen to one another, and when people feel heard and understood, again, they're probably less likely to engage in some of those problem behaviors. But I'm not trying to make necessarily a direct connection or say that there's any kind of direct impact between listening deeply and the problem behaviors you mentioned. However, we're sort of suggesting that in total, our process is meant to support positive culture and climate, or more caring and just culture and climate.
Right. Okay, we have another great question here. How do you adjust whole body listening to students with ADHD or ADD, or strategies to help them whole body listen?
Yeah, I should also just say right off the top, the whole body listening was a terminology that was used in one school in particular. We use the term listening deeply. So with that said, I'm not sure if that changes the nature of the question at all. And again, the three components that we focus mostly on is body language, attentional focus, and sort of that empathy and the caring question piece. So in terms of ADHD, I don't know that we have specific recommendations about that, but certainly the kind of thing that is meant to be, again, modified based on the needs of individual students and the educators that are working with them. If the list of body language look-fors needs to change or needs to be modified to meet the needs of the student and kind of help them based on where they are, that's certainly okay. That's the kind of modification that's exactly what I think is what we're suggesting is the right move.
I would say also, just based on my experience in schools, having an explicit diagram like the one that you showed us would actually be very helpful to a student with ADHD or with ADD, because you're being very explicit about what the whole body listening and what the deep listening looks like, sounds like, feels like. And giving those stepwise directions could really help all kinds of students, and being explicit about what's expected and what the norms are in a school. So there's, nothing left to, read between the lines. That's just something that I'd like to add. Glenn, I want to thank you. I was wondering if it would be possible for you to share any other, I know you mentioned you referred us to the website and some of the other tools that are specifically mentioned on the website. We do have a little bit of time left. Would it be possible for you to just run us through or give us an overview of some of the other relationship building, perhaps the relationship mapping strategy, so that we can all gain from that here tonight?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. I'll have to pop out of this slide deck. The other thing that I could share is some of the research findings around the values in schools, and that usually supports conversation about what seems to be important to people right now. But in terms of relationship mapping, again, on our website under resources for educators, you'll find the relationship mapping tool. It's a strategy. There's both one for a virtual environment and for in-person environment. So you can use either of those. And again, in broad strokes, relationship mapping is a tool for every staff and faculty member to review the name of every student and indicate whether they have a caring, trusted relationship with that student, meaning that student would go to them if they were having a problem that was personal or academic or otherwise. Or on the other side of that student's name, let's say we were using columns on a spreadsheet, and the other side of that student's name would be, an at-risk column. Again, that word might not be exactly what we use. We might change that word depending on the terminology in our school that we tend to use that holds some cachet. But essentially, that student is at risk in some way. And then from there, relationship mapping really walks people through how to take a look at that list, analyze it, and think about who it is that we should follow up with, meaning who it is that we're matching, adult to student. We also can do this work. Schools that work with us through the Caring Schools Network have the opportunity to do this with students and their peers. So we're mapping peer-to-peer. We can also map by asking students about the adults to whom they'd go. So that's yet a different way of thinking about the data. And then we can also ask adults in schools about, are you supported? How many people would you go to if you were having a problem? Or is there anybody that you would think of as maybe having a tough time or in need of some support? And we can do that in ways that, follow up on the analysis of that in ways that are, of course, different for each different stakeholder group and different tool that we're using. But so that there are opportunities to ask this question in different ways of different groups. And then in addition to that, we also have full-scale culture and climate surveys that we conduct. So that data usually helps us from year to year try to make improvements in the broad culture and the climate of the school.
Wonderful. So this is really a way for a school to zoom out and really take a look and see, is every student in our school connected somehow to an adult?
That's right.
And if a student is not connected, then it's a way of zooming in on that and being able to pair the child up with someone, the student up with someone, and make sure that we are fostering a connection. Wonderful.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Wonderful. Would you want to share anything else with us in terms of the values and the other things you were mentioning?
Sure thing. Yeah. So this is research that I always find interesting. We ask this question, what is it that people tend to prioritize, right? And really here we're asking a group of 40,000 students, young people across the nation. This is a representative sample including public school students, independent school students. These are religiously affiliated schools, charter schools, so really a broad range, and ask them to consider 3 core values: achievement, happiness, which we kind of define as feeling good most of the time, and then caring for others. And the question that we asked them, at least for today's pop quiz, was the question for you is rather, what percentage of youth do you think sort of elevated caring as their top priority, let's say? So again, we asked them to rank these 3. And so the question for you all, I would normally ask for a hand raise, but, in your heads, just think, what percentage do we think might have chosen caring? This is what it ends up looking like. Okay, so about 48%. We've got some hands raised. I don't know if we're able to even take those, but we've got hands. Hands are popping up. So nothing like a pop quiz to get hands in the air. About 48% are saying achievement here. Okay, 30% of students are saying happiness is their top priority, and only about 22% are likely to say that caring is their top priority. So sadly, if you ask them what their friends think, they're even more likely to think that their friends, their peers, value achievement over happiness and caring. So, depending on how you're asking that question, it can go kind of up or down from there. This is the sort of sentiment that we hear over and over again from young people. Maybe they value something differently, but really their folks, their parents, care a lot about whether or not they get good grades. Okay. So we asked the same youth to report the perceptions that they have of their parents' values. So again, kind of what do you think here, right? And I love that we had hands raised. If you want to raise them again, go for it. I don't know that we could take those calls, but of these youth that we asked, what do you think? How many of them selected caring as their parents' top priority? Maybe we will be unsurprised by the answer here, but this is what it kind of shakes out to look like. So as you can see, so this is sort of youth perception of their parents' priorities. The preference here is, of course, for academic achievement. It's even more pronounced than their own priority. And so even though they themselves are saying, I really care about, caring, at least 22% of us are saying caring is our top priority. They believe their parents are even more likely to value academic achievement than they are. In fact, they're 3 times more likely to agree than disagree with this statement. Up to 81% of young people saying that they think happiness or achievement is their parents' top priority here, right? Okay, final question. Final pop quiz question. I don't know if you're keeping score at home and you've got 2 out of 3, good for you. Okay, we're going to send, I know that there are gift bags being sent right now for the 2 out of 3s. The 3 out of 3s, I don't even know what the prize is, but I've been told it's quite extravagant. Last question here. Okay, which value do we think that parents indicate other parents most value? And again, there are only 3, so it's probably not that hard to tell, but it's pretty stark, right? Although parents themselves care about moral character in their children, they care about ethical development for their own child. Just about 10% of parents believe that other parents value that similarly. So what does that say about us, right? 96% of parents saying that they care about caring. And yet they could swear that everybody else is just here for the grades and to feel good most of the time. Okay. This right here is something that when we ask the questions in schools and we get the school data back, it can open up an important conversation among the parent community. It can also open up an important conversation among the staff and the parents, because what we find over and over again is that staff and faculty of all of these stakeholder groups care the most about caring. And I bet you if we focused in even more tightly on counselors, I'll leave it to you, right, to fill in the blank there. But I would be willing to bet that they are folks who are sort of in that 80 to 90 percentile group, people saying that is their top priority. The good thing is that these things, of course, are not mutually exclusive, right? It's just that oftentimes we do functionally have to make decisions between them, and we do make decisions between them. Raising that reality and highlighting it for young people and highlighting it for the adults in their lives who are charged with their moral character is, I think, something that can be really important and illustrative. So, these are sort of the things that we look for when we talk about a caring, inclusive school. Oftentimes it's living and breathing, right? It's about adults who can model this work really carefully. It's about safety, of course, really importantly, low levels of discrimination, bullying, and harassment. These are all the kinds of things that we ask about on our surveys and the kinds of things that we look to address in the work that we do. So I will take additional questions here. I know that we have a few in the Q&A. And thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Sure thing.
If anybody has any questions that they'd like to put in the Q&A box, we're here to answer any and all of your questions. So feel free to put them in the Q&A box down below. I will say especially in the wake of the pandemic, work like this is so crucial and so important when so many people have been siloed for so long, and really breaking those barriers down and creating these caring communities is so crucial and so important in the work that we're all doing. And the fact that everybody signed on here tonight just goes to show how committed we all are to doing this work and making it such a priority within our schools. We have another question coming in. Okay, how would you suggest that we change the perception of achievement? In light of what you just mentioned, all these values and the perceptions and the need for this work, how would you change the perception of achievement?
Yeah, I mean, this is a terrific question. I think that it's about a relatively sort of full court press here. It's about integrating strategies and showing students that we put our money where our mouth is and spend time on instruction in classrooms, but also more broadly in the school. So we provide sort of school level strategies as well as classroom level strategies. It's about pushing this work into homes and providing families the tools and the strategies that are aligned with the work that we're doing. And so that when students go home, they're hearing these same messages, and they're kind of in some ways doing similar kinds of skill building at home or in their communities. It's really about getting good information from people, using that information about their experience of the school community to find targeted ways to increase caring and commitment to justice in schools. And we can really do that, again, if we have feedback from people who are making up the community itself, and support from school leadership, and even a small group, I think, of really committed people within a school can do this. It often takes some time. It takes building in these tools and some of the language that becomes common in a school, and that takes a little bit of time. But over some time, it really is about, again, changing that culture and the climate away from one that's tightly focused on academic achievement alone, to show and really express in a variety of ways, as I'm trying to say, that caring and a commitment to justice and fairness is actually supporting academic achievement. It goes hand in hand with it, right? Right. That it's not deleterious to the project of personal happiness whatsoever. It's actually, we find that when we care for others, we learn to love and we learn to love them and feel greater amounts of happiness. It doesn't work in the opposite direction. It's not that we become happy and then we're ready to go and take care of other people, right? Right. So this is sort of, it's all self-supporting in the sense that when we do the work, we all get a little bit better at it. There's a positive contagion effect, and generally something like a core group that really makes the key difference in schools and in any community. We're looking to find those people, kind of motivate and elevate them and enable them.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the work that we do. It's not by any means something like we have a silver bullet here. It really is about, again, groups of committed people, enabling them, providing them the strategies, the tools, the frameworks.
Yeah. And I think it's also there's so much research out there that talks about well-being. And when you as a person are committed and connected to your values and you live a life of meaning and purpose, that is one of the greatest enhancers of happiness, of well-being. And, that drives a person forward to achieve. And I think schools broadening their definitions of happiness, well-being, achievement to broaden the scope is really the work that we're all looking to elevate. I have another question here. Is there advice for teachers on how to be patient and build those crucial relationships versus the content-focused classroom? And I think this question is really, there's so much focus on learning loss from the pandemic, and there's so much pressure to make up for lost learning that, this is a really great question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that each school really does have to, a big part of what we do is consult with schools to figure out what the balance is and how to integrate this work in a way that does balance, time on academics and, kind of in core discipline classes versus how do we really meaningfully also make up for the quote unquote learning loss that took place around social, emotional, and ethical skills and capacities. That has also, it's also a huge area that I think anybody in schools today understands we're in deep need, whether it be the growing mental health crisis among young people or the growing senses of disconnection from communities. And of course, the many behavior issues that schools saw, especially immediately last year, immediately coming back from summer break, but also I think really throughout the year. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes this year. I think we're all very optimistic. We hope it's going to be a good year.
Right.
But obviously there were similar kinds of, learning losses in this regard. And so each school will have to manage what they elevate most. And the caring schools in our Caring Schools network, I think, have taken a real stand and said, we're meeting the moment. We're putting our sort of our actual foot forward and really kind of taking charge and making sure that everybody in the school community understands how important this work is to us, how important caring is, how important it is to commit to the common good,
Right.
Especially at this time of really, I think it's fair to say that we're in a morally troubled time. And, I don't want to become too sort of hyperbolic, but democracy is, on the run across the world. And do we want to stand up for the principles of it? And do we know how to do that? That's what this work entails, right? It's about caring for people very deeply. And it's about making sure that we're doing what's right. And so, that's a sort of a long and broad answer, but
the idea of students feeling safe, seen, and heard. If a child doesn't feel that they have, or if a student doesn't feel like they are safe, seen, and heard within the school building, I don't know how open they're going to be for learning. And that's why it is so crucial to build those connections so early in the year. I have another great question here. Can you point to data or research that shows the monetary value, increased learning, or measurable adds of caring in schools? And this person writes, I understand quantifying caring may be difficult, but data points are selling points to all stakeholders.
Yeah, I would just point you to any of the research that we've conducted on our webpage. We have reports that I would certainly point you to, especially our report about the children we mean to raise is one that will provide plenty of research background. for the work that we're doing in schools, but some of the more recent reporting on loneliness and some of our new and current reporting on care, the state of care in our country right now, I think is all supportive of our work. But in every one of our strategies, you'll find research to support those strategies as well. So any of the strategies online, you can take a look at those. Again, relationship mapping is a great place to start, and there are several research studies that I think I would point you to, connecting to that work. And then from there, there's really good research. I would take a look at Caring Leadership, which is a book that just came out last year. That's a terrific collection of research that I think really highlights the importance. First provides the research frame for the word care, which I think is also something that is important. You know, we can break the word empathy down into several components, and I could get lost on that, and I won't. But you know, really, it's this third part of empathy. Yes, we can take other people's perspective. Yes, we can feel what it is that they feel, that affective piece. But do we really see them as an independent person worthy of our care? Are they really, you know, somebody that we see as in need in some kind of way that's similar to the need that we often experience, right? See them in their homes, in their humanity. And are we motivated to support them if they're suffering in some kind of way? That's the third component of empathy that many people don't reach in, you know, these kind of broad circles that we're suggesting are important for caring communities. And we know for a fact, you know, politicians have those first two components and often not that third one, or they have, you know, all manner of salespeople or serial killers. We know that they can cognitively empathize, but what they lack is that third piece where we're really placing at the center of our consideration how needful somebody is and whether or not we can help them ameliorate suffering.
Right.
It's an important piece.
Right.
So again, I'll lost on a tangent, but
no, I think the need for building these caring communities and reaching, you know, listening deeply, and the other strategies that you mentioned, hopefully helps schools, helps all of us embed that empathy towards others. You know, I've always heard that educators have a soul that's bigger than the average person. You know, you're here as an educator for a reason. You know, we're built differently. And I think that it's time for us to really model that so much in the work that we're doing and raise that and elevate that, and for our schools to do the same. So
absolutely. I should also point you to Rick Weisborg's work on it's The Children We Mean to Raise. His book is a really great place to start if you're looking for some research background. I can also point you to the EASEL Lab. That's EASEL. EASEL Lab at Harvard Graduate School of Education is doing really terrific work, in particular looking at the impact of specific SEL programs, and some of their tools are really fantastic. So I would point you in their direction. And then Justice in Schools, Mira Levinson's work is really fantastic as well. So lots and lots. There's plenty of research out there to support how important caring and a focus on justice can be in the overall culture and climate of the school.
Okay. And if any of the attendees would like to take a look at any of the Making Caring Common strategies, they are that Glenn has mentioned tonight, they are available on makingcaringcommon.org. Is that the website that they should go to?
You can actually see it here on the screen. We've got down the bottom right-hand corner, mcc.gse.harvard.edu.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is, and I'm more than happy. I've got my email address there as well, caring schools with an S at makingcaringcommon.org. I'm more than happy to follow up with anybody who would like to talk offline. You can also book a time with me anytime on our website as well. So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to say hi.
Okay, thank you so much, Glenn, for tonight's webinar. This has been brought to you by OHEL's Teacher Support Helpline. We are here to support educators and youth support professionals, whether it's challenges you're facing for yourself in your classroom or challenges that relate to your own personal well-being. And stay tuned. We're going to be hosting monthly webinars for educators. And there are many more exciting resilience building projects that are coming out from OHEL's National Trauma Support Team. Thank you. Thank you for attending.